Thank you for coming here. This is Todd Moseley with Spinal Simplicity. And, Todd, we're thrilled that you're here today. Part of the reason why we wanted you to be here is just to meet you, because you've done so much for our space in such a short amount of time. And also to, in our field right now, you've probably heard this a lot. You've been all over the country, you've been all over the world, and you've seen and heard the stories from physicians, I'm sure, at this point in time, talking about what's going on in our field, especially interventional pain and minimally invasive spine. It's just the hot topic in this day and age. In our backdrop here in East Tennessee has been filled with problems that we've talked about as far as opioids and the misperception of what pain medicine is all about. And then now today, there's been a transformation of our field, transformation in the opioid crisis, transformation in the technologies that we can provide for patients that are helping patients in tremendous ways and adding so much value to our communities. And we're quite literally trying to redefine what pain means and pain treatment is for our community. And I don't think there's a better example of a product or a company that has allowed us to do that than Spinal Simplicity and your line of portfolio of products to include your flagship product, the Minuteman. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that.
Well, Dr. Choo, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me in.
Yeah.
Through your hands, we get to be a small part of these outcomes, and you're absolutely right that it's been an explosion in interventional pain for the last 4 to 5 years now, redefining the spine market. And the world's taken notice, Wall Street's taken notice. The number of patients that were not going to be candidates for traditional spine surgery that you're able to treat, get out of pain, and get back into seeing their grandchildren's baseball game is remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, those are very true statements. We're seeing it here all the time, especially with the Minuteman. And so your background, 25 plus years in the orthopedic world, is that correct?
It is, yeah, a little longer than that. I started right out of school at 22, and so I've had experience in total hips, total knees, sports medicine, trauma, spine, and now interventional pain. And I think it's been one of the things that I look at as a benefit, because I've literally drawn something from every aspect that I've been involved with. Being in our doctors' ORs through all those years, if you pay attention, you learn a lot. I feel like I've gotten another education from watching you all do your craft and go about the work, and we've tried to apply things from different specialties to interventional pain to truly have that minimally invasive solution.
You're co-founder.
I am the co-founder.
Yeah, yeah. And so everybody has an origin story, right? So if you look at where Steve Jobs, Hewlett Packard, you look at Bill Gates to all of the greats in the past, right? Somebody's writing something on a napkin, they're starting something in a garage. How did you start here?
So I met Dr. Hess, Harold Hess. He's a neurosurgeon in Kansas City, now retired, but he had an idea that I looked at first in 2007. And when I understood what he wanted to do, and it was really along the lines of X-Stop. I don't know if you remember that product, but it was all the rage at that time. And so we were going to bring a competitor to X-Stop to the market. And we started looking at it and exploring it. And we kind of redefined the approach, because when I fully understood what Dr. Hess wanted to try to accomplish with this product, I went back, brought a few ideas back to him. And over the course of the next 6 to 8 months, we kind of refined what we were going to do. And originally, we were going to go to market with a spacer device. And then we saw the early results coming out of Europe with X-Stop. And why are these devices failing? 6 months, 18 months down the road, and started studying the radiographs, and you can notice there was erosion into the spinous process, so the doctors losing the distraction they had at the time of surgery, pain's coming back for the patient, patients representing themselves. And so we thought, okay, how do we solve that issue? It wasn't that the concept was flawed. Tip of the cap to the inventors of X-Stop. They had the right idea. They just didn't have the right implant for the doctor for long-term clinical success. So we quickly realized we needed a fusion device. We were able to pioneer our surgical lateral approach, which prior to Dr. Hess and I creating that, there was not a lateral approach in the U.S. And so we were fortunate to get a method patent on that, But the thing that we're most proud of is that it's truly the least invasive way to place a posterior implant for that patient, because you're not cutting in your muscle, you're only dilating your way into that space.
So you've given a great overview of this process. Now explain this to a 10-year-old. What does this what does this look like in very, very lay terms that is easily understood?
So what we wanted to do for our patient and through our doctor's hands be able to accomplish was open up a space that had collapsed over time in someone's posterior region of their lumbar spine, the low back. And so how do you reestablish the height that should be there naturally? Because if you're able to reestablish that height, you get that patient out of pain. So the impingement of the nerves are no longer happening because you reestablish the height that should naturally be there. And then you want long-term success with that product, so it needs to form a bony union between the two spinous processes, and we were able to do that for our...
Can you show
Sure.
this to us? Yeah.
So what we're talking about, this is our Minuteman device, and then the product goes in between the two spinous processes. The wings on the device open up on the contralateral side or the opposite side, and then the doctor locks that down. The product's coated with a substance called hydroxyapatite, which just occurs in everybody's bones naturally. And with HA on the implant, you're going to get a very fast, very predictable fusion to occur. And once that fusion occurs, that's going to stand the test of time, and that patient's not going to have that problem again.
So basically that segment which was causing a lot of pain because it was moving around and squishing on nerves and causing leg and back pain, you've opened up the space and you locked it down so that it doesn't move, and those nerves are not getting...
They're freed up.
They're freed up,
Yeah,
essentially.
they're freed up. And we're able to do this without cutting any of the natural structures. So there's a big ligament that runs on top of the spinous process, because the supraspinous ligament. We leave that ligament intact. You don't cut any muscle. You only dilate your way into the space.
So, I mean, there's an incredible amount of engineering to this, all right? And so there was probably some naysayers at some point in time in your development. Tell us
Yes,
about
sir.
those challenges at some point. I don't know the backstory, but this had to have had some challenges in people that were saying, well, I don't know if this thing is really going to work.
No, I think I usually start my conversation with some of the doctors, particularly on the surgeon side, where I'll concede maybe we're guilty of the sins of everyone that's come before us, but if you'll give me 5 minutes and let me walk you through what we did differently, I think you'll quickly understand on how I think we took a good idea and made it better with solving the main issue, and that was micromotion with the implant. So our implant doesn't suffer from any micromotion, and so if you can guard against that implant not moving, once it's been implanted, you'll get a very fast, very predictable fusion to occur. I think the other thing that was difficult for some to understand was how do you affect the front part of the spine? So our implant goes into the back part, the posterior part of the spine, but how do you take a patient that has what's called like an angled or angular instability, almost like an alligator mouth, where when you look at them on a flexion extension x-ray, that's really opening it up.
Right.
And it shows this alligator mouth. And how do you reestablish that balance that should naturally be there? Well, if you leave this ligament intact, now you have a fulcrum from an engineering standpoint for that implant to act upon to affect the anterior compartment as well as the posterior compartment. And that concept wasn't very well understood because prior to our implant coming out, it wasn't possible to do that.
Yeah.
If you cut this ligament posterior, which most people are cutting that ligament, you lose your mechanical advantage over the anterior part of the spine.
Well, and to see this in real life, right? As you're doing this procedure, it's almost like you're taking the slack out of that. Of that segment. You've got a buckling of that ligament or various ligaments, and as you pull that slack out, it's almost you're reconforming that segment to where it should be, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, we hear from our patients all the time, I'm standing straighter.
Right.
And that's quite a compliment because we know that the implant through our doctor, again, has been able to accomplish what our main goal was.
So, because we're talking about so much disruption in this world when technology moves us so fast, right? We're seeing things move in directions that we can hardly anticipate in a lot of ways. That's just how technology is and how disruptive it can be. So when you are, if you're thinking about the spine world, right? The traditional spine world. What in your mind is broken in that chain?
For me, I think spinning, again, I mentioned earlier, I've had the pleasure of being in lots of different areas of medicine, and in the sports medicine world, I was part of that revolution from going from open rotator cuff repair to arthroscopically assisted with ACLs and meniscal, everything done through the scope. And when I look at spine, and when you open up, when somebody is doing a traditional posterior fusion now, they're opening that patient's spine, they're retracting all that muscle back. And that's one of your pillars, or your three legs of the stool, of your pillars of strength of your low back. And if you can avoid disrupting that musculature, it's absolutely in the best interest of the patient. And so we wanted to make sure that in our design that we mitigated our doctor from ever having to open that patient up.
So if I'm a patient coming and I'm looking for some help, and I've got these two choices here, right? There's the traditional approach that you just explained, and this approach. How you've explained it to me, and I'm a physician, so I intuitively understand this. But to the regular Joe and Jane out there, what does that mean to them as far as what to expect, recovery, all of that?
So the recovery on our procedure is relatively straightforward. You know, our doctors will put restrictions on the patient for bending, twisting, lifting for a number of weeks to make sure that that bony formation is well underway and you get that, get it to solidify. But other than that, there's little downtime for the patient. We've had patients that have received the implant and they're at the mall 2 days later shopping. Now, that it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and we do see that. Now, does minimally invasive mean absolutely no pain after the procedure, or
I think that patient can expect some mild discomfort for that first week, and then you see it dramatically tail off after that. Now, we have had patients that have taken no postoperative pain medication, but I think it's routinely probably prescribed for at least a few days for the patient in case they need it.
Yeah. So you've given a sales pitch for this procedure, but this is also based on real world data. Okay. Well, so and so maybe you can convince the patient, but how are you now going to convince the skeptical medical communities, skeptical surgeons, spine world that's so entrenched in the old ways? How do you go about saying, well, hey, look, what we're doing is not just this great widget. There is data.
No, there's a responsibility on the company's part to make sure that you're producing as many clinical papers as you possibly can. And you're talking to men and women of science, so you need to prove it with science.
Right.
And so maybe 4 years ago it was a weakness of the company. We didn't have enough clinical information. But today I will tell you there's nobody in the space that's producing more studies than we are. And then the type of study we're producing, we like to call real world. So we do a fusion study, and if you chose to operate on the patients, if there's 50 patients, all 50 patients are eligible for the study. Nobody's excluded. They would call it an inclusion-exclusion criteria. We don't use that in our studies. So if you chose to operate on them, they're included in our study. I'll give you an example. Our fusion study, we showed a 93% fusion rate, and that's with patients that had a very large BMI, 56, patients undergoing cancer treatment, smokers, diabetics. No one would ever do a study like that. We thought it was important for us to do it.
Not a lot of people would want to operate on a patient like that either.
No, they would
right,
not.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Again, it leads itself to the minimally invasive nature of the procedure that you're able to accomplish for that patient, that now you take a non-surgical candidate and you make them, through your hands, you give them the ability to treat them and get them out of pain.
Yeah, and I'll attest to that. I think there's a number of surgeons who are, in this day and age, they seem to be more and more conservative, okay? I don't think there's been as big of a rush, particularly in our community, just to operate, which is a good thing for patients.
Yes.
But a lot of times, what we see is that these patients who may be sicker, elderly, that don't have an option for decompression, right? Maybe our injections or whatnot have failed and they've stopped working. You send them up to a nurse and you're like, look, I don't think it's a good idea to operate on you, not because we don't want to help you, but because of your elderly condition, yes, the illnesses that make this unsafe for you to have an operation, all of those factors. And the patient's, well, am I going to have to sit in this wheelchair? I'm debilitated. I can't play with my grandkids. What do I do here? My quality of life is miserable. And I think that's where we're seeing this really come into play as a very quick, minimally invasive way to help those patients. and get them back on their feet very quickly. I'm sure you've heard this.
Well, Dr. Choo, I can give you two real world examples. So I have a neighbor in Fort Scott, Kansas that I bought some property from. He's now 91 years old. At 90, he didn't know what I did for a living. He only saw me in my old farm truck, work clothes, but he's suffering from spinal stenosis terribly. And again, at 90, no one's going to operate on him. I got him up to Kansas City to see an interventional pain physician. He evaluated him. He's in relatively good health otherwise.
Right.
And it was dramatic. So he went from having a cane and having a walker to being able to ambulate on his own with no cane and no walker.
So
and
now
again,
he can sit on your tractor and work for you. Is that what,
he has taken good care of the farm down there and keeping an eye on everything. And then my father-in-law, 81 years old, Vietnam veteran, Bronze Star winner, tough guy. When you talk about you develop products for your friends, family. I mean, if you're not willing to put this in your mom or your dad, it's not good enough for us. And so he now has 2 Minuteman implants.
No kidding.
And a Liberty implant, and scheduled for his opposite side on his SI joint September 15th.
So how's he feeling?
He's back to gardening, back to doing all the things you love to do and want to do. And
so these are very, very personal stories.
Oh, it's very personal. And then one of our key engineers at Spinal Simplicity, his wife, received our Minuteman implant, and she had a previous fusion, and so she had what they would call adjacent segment disease at the level just above, at 3-4. It had broken down on her, and we were able to do it just with our Minuteman technology, and she didn't have to go through an open procedure again.
So, I mean, that's miraculous. So how does that make you feel as a person who started out with this?
Well, it's the greatest reward you get asked for. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, I love to serve, not to be served. And again, when you see these outcomes, it's quite a reward.
So, well, now this is a homespun product in your backyard of Kansas City. But you're all over, not just the United States, but the world, right? So you went down to Australia, New Zealand, Dubai. What's going on in those markets?
We first launched this product in 2011 in Europe, and then we got our approval in the U.S. in 2015. After we got our approval in the U.S. in 2015, we really focused on the U.S. market, and we went back to Europe last year. And had such a warm reception because of the success we've had here at home. And so we're relaunching the product back in Europe this fall. I'll be there in October. That'll really kick off that process for us. We'll be in the UK. We did our first case in Dubai. We'll soon to have approval in Canada. We do have our approval in Australia now. And we're probably a few weeks away from getting our approval in Mexico. So we are taking the product international. We're opening up the Brazilian market as well. That's another 200+ million people.
Wow, that's fantastic. So by going global, what's the biggest surprise?
I think for us, same things that people want here at home, they want abroad. We're a lot closer than maybe the distance would tell you we are. That stenosis is a problem all over the world.
It doesn't matter what language you speak, the stenosis is a problem for everyone in the same way, it sounds like. Yes,
sir. I always talk about it that gravity and Father Time are undefeated. So that degenerative process doesn't escape anywhere on this planet. And so as that disc degrades, you have more impingement on the nerves and that spinal stenosis.
That's incredible. I mean, that has to make you feel really, really great when that such an from conception to worldwide. I mean, you got to feel great.
Well, the whole company feels it. Every month we have a first Fridays of the month. We bring our whole group together. We play a patient testimonial at every one of the meetings. It's encouraging. Our staff's asking for it. They want to see who else did we help today.
Yeah.
And that's how we view it when we look at what we did on a daily basis on revenue. It's listed as how many patients did we help today.
Oh, that's great. So morale, it's got to be a morale booster for the entire organization.
It absolutely is. We've actually had patients come into our office to say thank you. We've gotten letters that have been written to the company.
That's awesome.
Again, through our doctors. I mean, we're not doing the procedure. Our doctors are, but again, through your hands, we get to be a small part of that. And then we know it's our obligation to what's the next iterative change you're going to make to the product and how do you keep making it better.
Well, we actually didn't talk about safety, because that's also a critical component.
It's
Because
critical.
when you and we can almost back up and say, okay, when you talk about this open procedure versus something like this, what's the time difference under anesthesia, and the potential for problems when you compare one versus the other?
Yeah, it's dramatic. So if you look at the literature in the traditional spine world, for someone that maybe has they would call it a grade 1 spondy, which is just one slip of a vertebral body on the other. There's a huge paper out of New York, almost 90,000 patients, and they showed a 25% readmission rate within the first 90 days
Of the hospital?
Of the hospital.
Okay.
Open spine surgery.
So would you say 25%?
25%.
Wow, that's huge. Yeah.
And you compare that to ours, and I can't tell you. I don't even know of a readmission that we've had.
Well, I mean, that's in this day of value-based care and economic data and whatnot, payers are going to be looking at something like that and say, okay, well, we know that 25% of these patients are going to go back. The incurred costs and whatnot are going to be absolutely massive. So if you're collecting that type of data and showing, hey, your device, not only is it quicker recovery, but maybe the system in general could save a massive amount of dollars. I mean, is that something that in the calculus of the company?
It is. We talked about clinical studies earlier. We have a paper underway right now called the Stability Study, where we are using AI technology. So if a patient came in to see you for the first time today, you can put a sensor on their belt loop, have them walk 10 meters forward,
Right.
10 meters back, take that same sensor, put it on a headband, they have them stare at an object on the wall for 10 seconds, and it gives you a very thorough assessment of their balance and their gait, their pelvis tilt angle, and it's showing you if that patient is a potential fall risk.
Right.
And so we know what happens if a patient falls. It could be a terrible cascade of events.
Yes.
And so we've shown that our implant can mitigate a fall risk by helping, again, to reduce the effects of stenosis, to dramatically improve a patient's balance and gait,
Yeah.
which has a huge impact to the healthcare community at large,
Yeah.
because we don't want any of the patients falling.
Right. I mean, and to put it into perspective, a fall for an elderly patient is the morbidity and actual chances for death
Yes.
are extremely high, especially if you break one of these, a long bone or a larger
break
bone.
a hip.
Yeah. That's great. And so I'm sure that data may be published here pretty soon. Is that something that you're?
Yeah, we'll have 150 patients enrolled in the study by the end of the year, and we're very anxious to get that one out for our doctors and for our payers.
It's very, very exciting, and that's what payer, in this name of our game, payers have got to see the return on investment. If they want to
do.
pay for these devices and pay for the care, they want to see that they're ultimately saving dollars through outcomes.
Yeah, we have another safety and efficacy paper, 191 patients, no readmissions, no adverse events, and tremendous pain relief for
That's
the
fantastic.
individuals.
That's hitting all the measures and the marks that they want to hear. Finish this sentence. In 5 years, spine care will be.
I think you're going to see in 5 years more injectables for the disc and more exciting technologies. We haven't got to talk much about it, but we actually, I'll give you a little breaking news. We just received this today that we got breakthrough designation for our disc product from
okay.
FDA, which is an injectable for the disc that can cross-link the collagen in the tissue, increase the strength of the disc by 50%. It's a permanent covalent bond that's formed, and it's now with the patient for the rest of their life. So we think we may have the solution for degenerative disc disease. I think it'll be about 24 months for us to get it on the market in the U.S., but it's coming. The team spent a tremendous amount of time and effort, but I'd like to see us go with more solutions that are easier for the patient. There will be no downtime for the patient
At all. I mean,
through your hands, again, through a 22 gauge needle, you'll be able to treat the disc, and that patient can immediately get off the table and go about their daily activities with no downtime.
That's breaking news today.
That's breaking news today.
That's
My
super
team doesn't
exciting.
even know that yet.
They
I got
don't
that
even know
call
it
just
yet.
as I walked in.
That's
so.
fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. That's really, really exciting. So I can't wait to talk to you more about that. So if you had say you're sitting in front of a group of highly skeptical surgeons, spine surgeons, maybe some of them have been in the business as long as you have,
Sure.
or new ones that are coming out of fellowship, never heard of this business
Right.
before, and that's a tough audience, right? So
It is.
give your pitch to a group of spine surgeons.
So I was at the State of Spine meeting in Cabo, which is hosted by Dr. Frank Phillips and Dr. Vaccaro and Dr. Todd Albert, some of the real who's who of spine. And I've noticed that over the last 3 years that maybe a little bit of wall that was between interventional pain and spine that was up is starting to fade. And I think the results that they're getting through your hands for these patients are undeniable.
Yeah.
And the body of evidence is overwhelming. And it still surprises some of the spine surgeons, I think, how through this one implant are you able to get that unbelievable result for that patient. And a part of it comes to less is more. And I think understanding the spine biomechanics is first and foremost that as we age, so a younger individual, 80% of the load in the spine comes through the anterior column, the front part of this column. But you get to be my age or older, and it shifts. It's almost the opposite, that 80% is now coming through the posterior elements.
Yeah.
And so if you can reestablish that balance that we talked about earlier, that's how you get these remarkable results, because the average age of our patient nationwide is 74 years old.
Yeah.
And we've had patients up to 95, and we've had patients, obviously younger than that, but 74 is the average age.
Yeah.
And so they're all within that, where 80% of that load's now in the posterior elements. Leaving that ligament intact is key. And that you can reestablish the balance, not just posterior, but anterior. And as these nerves come out from this foraminal opening, you take that pressure off that nerve, you can actually see it during the case that you've opened up that foraminal space. And that's why that patient's doing so well.
You can actually just see it opening up as you're putting the rasp through. It's really remarkable. Sometimes if you're really, really lucky, all the angular stability or instability is resolved. Some of that alligator mouthing is just kind of, you kind of making those end plates parallel again. I mean, it's almost like it is kind of a restoration of what it should look like, if that makes any sense.
It's a beautiful thing when you see it, because you know that patient's going to have a spectacular outcome. And you talked about safety earlier. One of the things that is working in our favor for our procedure is that actually the bony anatomy is protecting the nerve roots. So the nerve roots are all exiting well below. These are the facet joints. The facet joints are protecting your entry for this implant. It's very difficult to have a problem because you can't hurt the nerve because your bony anatomy is protecting.
You'd almost have to try.
It
would. I'm not to say that there can't be mishaps, but
sure.
But it is in my opinion, super safe. If all the bigger procedures that we do, which all of our procedures are minimally invasive, super safe.
Yeah, it
super
is.
safe. Yeah, and so now you had a skeptical audience of spine surgeons. What about if you went in front of my colleagues, the interventional pain physician? They're a lot of the young ones that are coming out. They're
Sure.
grabbing at this left and right. You got some older dogs that are out there that are looking at this. Is this the right thing to do? So there may be some skepticism there. What's your conversation with them like?
I think for us, again, you're going back to safety. And is there anybody better in the world at navigating or placing a needle or a guide wire than interventional pain? I would tell you the answer is no. I mean, you're exquisite with fluoro, direction with the needle, pinpoint accuracy, and our procedure is predicated with a guide wire.
And I think that's exactly right. When I look at this procedure, even though it is so unique in the way that you place this, right? Because a lot of our stuff is posterior, straight up and down, AP and laterals. And you're taking this rather strange trajectory that we're not usually taking when we do these things, but it's just a little bit of an adjustment. But it is, once you get the feel for it, it's very intuitive after a while, and it's a lot of fun to do. Technically speaking, it's a lot of fun to do. The engineering of the device is not only from the actual implant, but the tools and the instrumentation that you have to use is really, really innovative. I mean, I like nothing I've ever seen. And so that kudos to your team of engineers that put that thing together, because it is one heck of a job, I think.
Thank you. take it as a labor of love, and they understand because our engineers are going into the lab with us to place these implants so they can experience exactly what our doctor's experiencing. And you know, for us, we always talk about we don't want to fail in your OR. We want to fail in our lab. That's where we stress the product, we test it rigorously, and we try to understand everything that possibly can happen.
And it shows. I mean, that it's a robust tool that we get to use. If there are patients listening, what's one thing they need to hear about? What's the truth that they need to hear about?
I think if you're having discomfort, having difficulty walking, seek your doctor's advice. Come see him. Come see you. I don't suffer. You know, my stepfather was suffering, and you know, we got him help. My neighbor was suffering. We got him help. And it doesn't matter the age, because again, you mentioned it earlier, these procedures can be done with max sedation. They don't have to be done under general anesthesia. Through your care, you're able to do that and have a very comfortable recovery. And so don't suffer.
Yeah, that's a great message. Challenges in the future. What are the big challenges for you and your company moving forward on how to get your products out there in this world?
I think for us, there's a number of doctors training. We're always training every month. We'll have doctors in the Kansas City office this weekend. It's a big country. There are a lot of people to get to. And we want to make sure that when you walk into the OR, you're supremely confident, and that we've done everything we can on the backside to have the best training possible. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges for us, is to make sure we're spending enough time with each and every one of our doctors, and then your APPs as well. So patient selection is paramount. You know, that's where the skill comes in, that you're selecting the right patients. And I've seen some of your patient testimonials. When you get this great outcome, it tells me immediately you had great patient selection.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely critical. In our space, there's so many new tools that are given to us, but not every tool is right for every patient, and that is, you know, it's kind of one of these magical things that we get to do, is to match them up with the right tool for the right person. And we have never seen in our field the amount of transformative things that we can offer for our patients if you match it up correctly. But you know, and that's not only do you have to have the requisite skills in the OR to be confident and make sure that you can do it, but it's much more than that, right? It's making sure that that person is the right fit, and also your care line afterwards is in place, so that we don't get these readmissions or complications or problems. There has never been, in my experience doing this for almost 20 years, a more exciting time to do pain medicine. And really, in the end, I think you guys have one of the most exciting products that's out there.
Well, thank you, and I think the rest of the world agrees with you. It's an incredibly exciting time for interventional pain with the new technologies that are emerging, and the results that you're able to deliver for your patient through such a minimally invasive procedure.
Well, Todd, do you want to tell us about what else is out there in your portfolio?
Sure. So no, we decided to go into the SI space last year, and we borrowed a little bit from our Minuteman technology for that project. But I looked at so what were the issues and problems, complications maybe that some of the folks were facing with the SI. So if you're doing a lateral approach to the SI space, one of the first things that potentially can happen is, you have S1, S2, S3, and so if the implant is too long, you can actually hit a nerve ending from S1. And so our first thought was, how do you mitigate that? So we designed an implant that's not physically long enough to ever hit a foraminal opening.
Yeah.
And the other thing
this goes back to safety, what we talked about.
It's safety.
Yeah.
And then we looked at and we use a company called Pneumologics. They do great work. We did a finite element analysis of the SI joint, and we determined where's the very best bone in the SI joint. Well, it's above S1. It's about 2.25 millimeters thick, pure cortical bone at that area. And so we wanted to use what was called AO principles to how do you lock down and fuse a joint. And so we have the ability to lightly decorticate the space, the joint itself. The implant's going to go about 12 millimeters past the joint, and then we're going to deploy 20 millimeters of wing.
Yeah.
And those wings are now pulled back as we compress it on the ilium side. As this implant goes in and compresses, it causes compression across the joint.
The joint
it squeezes
together.
it,
Yeah.
which is the very best way to lock down and fuse a joint. We recently just got some CT images of a patient only a month out. They were admitted to the ER for another reason, got a CT pelvis, and Dr. Doug Beal, and this is Dr. Bagani's patient, and he was kind enough to share these images with us, which just a month out, no one would expect it. You're already seeing great signs of fusion, but we saw great signs of fusion. The radiologist even commented, that implant's fused. Now, it's a long way to go to be that solid, but it was really impressive. And so we credit that to the compression that the implant's able to deliver, and again, the safety of only going 12 millimeters across the joint.
And the speed.
The speed, one single implant, all done over a guide wire again.
Yeah.
So there's nobody better in the world, as I mentioned earlier, placing a guide wire than you. Guide wire goes in, all the instrumentation goes over the guide wire. Implant deploys and lock it down with one single implant. Most other companies are using 2 to 3 implants.
That's fantastic. And then anything else in your portfolio?
Well, we mentioned just a little bit of the injectable for the disc. That's going to be a big area of focus for the next several years, probably 2 years away from getting that product to market. But we're excited about it because every single one of us has degenerative disc disease. And I think that there's a real solution. And again, this is coming from one of our chief scientific officer, Dr. Tom Hedman. He's an MIT PhD and created a world-class product. And we're finally at the point where we can really do some serious work and get this thing to the market and get across the finish line.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Well, Todd, thank you so much.
Thank you
for your
the
time.
opportunity.
It was a fascinating discussion, and I've learned a whole bunch from this, so very much appreciate you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, sir.